Welcome to our video 3 of kinematics. In this video we're going to have a look at the three functions that we defined earlier, those being the function describing displacement or position, secondly the function describing velocity, and thirdly describing the function acceleration. So firstly, the three functions that we have, we've got our position at any time, then we have our velocity at any time, of course, and then finally we've got our acceleration. Now the relationship between these functions is firstly the relationship between position and velocity is simply velocity is the first derivative of position, and secondly the relationship between velocity and the function defining acceleration is again, it's a first derivative. Now, similarly, the relationship between position or displacement and acceleration is such that acceleration is the second derivative of the function describing position here. Alright, now looking at what all these functions actually mean, consider we're working with, let's say we're working in the field of physics and we're talking about the position of a particle, and we want to know, or this function here tells us the location of the particle. So say for example, if we're at a value, or we're at a value of t that gives a output of 0, then what we find is that the particle itself is at the origin, or it's at its starting location. Now for a positive value, the particle is on the right. It's on the right of the origin. And similarly, for a negative value coming out of this function here, describing position, what we'll find is that it's on the left-hand side of the origin. Okay, very good. Now, let's have a look at the velocity. What do you think it means when we have a velocity of 0? Well, basically, it means that the particle's not moving. So there's no change in displacement with respect to time at that given point in time. So we can say that the particle is momentarily stationary. In other words, that it's not moving. Similarly, if the velocity function is outputting a positive value, then the particle is moving to the right. And similarly, if we're getting a negative output, then what we'll find is that the particle is moving to the left. Done. Now looking at acceleration, have a think about in the function describing displacement, if we had a value of 0 coming out of it, what it meant was the particle itself was at the origin. Now for velocity, if we got a 0 velocity, then it meant the particle was momentarily stationary. And think about it, if the acceleration is 0, then the particle is therefore at a constant velocity. The particle's velocity is constant, or in other words, it's not accelerating, it's just staying its course. Now if we go into the positive direction for velocity, then we find that the particle is accelerating, or its velocity is increasing. And similarly, for the negative direction, or negative output, what we find is that it's not increasing, but rather it is decreasing. Alright, so what we've got here is a little table that sort of relates all of the three functions describing displacement, velocity, and acceleration for the outputs, so positive, 0, and minus, the outputs of the various functions and how they're all linked together. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll have a look at some speed related questions.